This video builds on the last video. We're using the same penetration testing lab environment we set up in the previous video. With this video, we have Kali running, Kali 2018.1 running in VirtualBox, and we also have in the background a Metasploitable 2 virtual machine running. And these two virtual machines are set up on the same virtual network. So what we're going to do, and I haven't set anything up yet, I'll just kind of walk you through some of the setup phases here, is we're going to use a tool called Armitage. Armitage is a graphical front end for Metasploit. It's a pretty simple tool to use. All it really does is run the command line Metasploit framework tools for you in the background with a graphical interface. So it's a good tool to start out to get familiar with penetration testing. It's certainly not something you want to use operational. You want to have an idea of what each command does rather than rely on a GUI. But for learning it, it's a decent tool. So I'm going to go to a terminal window here. Click on the terminal. We'll start this up. And we're going to do everything through Armitage, including the target discovery. We're going to scan our subnet IP and discover the Metasploitable 2 machine. So the first thing we want to do is just type in Armitage. Let me make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, Armitage. And we're going to get an error here. This is intentional. I left it in here because I have not set up the Metasploit framework database. And that's fine. This will take a second. And what this is doing, when this prompts, you can just click on connect. We can change these later, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we can just click on connect. So what this is doing right now, go ahead and click on yes here. You notice it says it's starting Msf RPCD, and then we have this connection refused warning message here. So basically what's going on is the front end graphical user interface, or GUI for Armitage, is trying to connect to the back end, which is the Msf RPCD, the Metasploit framework. You see it started there finally. So the front end can't start properly. The GUI can't start until the back end service is started. They just both kind of launch at the same time. So once the RPC starts, then the front end should connect, and we'll get an error message here because we have not initialized the database. But we'll walk through how to fix that. It tells you how to fix it in the warning. So it should come up here in a second. And it looks like we finally got the warning message. So we're using a newer version of Kali. So what we need to do is the msfdb init. This initializes the Metasploit framework database. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK here and just type in here in the terminal window msfdb space init, and this will basically set up the database for us. It may take a couple seconds. And it looks like it's creating the database. I didn't press enter or anything, it just does it automatically. Set up the schema. Looks like the database is finally done initializing, so now we can try Armitage again. We'll see if we get that same error. We should not. We'll go ahead and click on connect just like before. And you even see here it created the Msf user, which is what we're connecting to the database with. So these things kind of tie together. We'll go ahead and start the RPC service. Same process as before. It's got to start the service on the back end before we can connect on the front end with the Armitage Gui. Looks like it's getting closer. I've got this running in a virtual machine, so it's a little bit slow. If I increase the RAM and the number of processors, I would speed this up. So that's an option for you, but if you increase the RAM and processors for too many of your virtual machines, and none of them will work, depending on how large or how many CPUs and RAM your host has. So it looks like it's started up here. So this is the Armitage Gui. So the first thing we're going to do, I'll give you a little quick tour here of the GUI. This window right here in the center is where the targets will appear as you add them or discover them. Down here is the console, so you can actually run commands through this interface, just like you were in the Metasploit framework command line. On the left side over here, you've got the modules that make up Metasploit. You have the auxiliary modules, which are good for fuzzing, scanning, doing some reconnaissance. You've got the exploit modules, which is, if you're doing exploitation, you're typically using one of the Windows ones down here, such as, we go here to DCE RPC. Here is one of the old ones, MSO3026. And if we scroll down a little bit more, you can find any of the Windows ones here. So there's quite a few Windows exploits and other exploits. We can also look at the payloads. So with Metasploit, if you choose an exploit, you need to select a payload to be delivered with the exploit. And then you've got some post-exploitation modules, so things you can do after you've accomplished an exploit, such as escalate privileges, do some reconnaissance, etc. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to... So we're not too concerned with the exploits right now. I will show you some of the recent exploits are typically with Windows under SMB. You expand this, you can see, for instance, Eternal Blue is right here, which came out last year. You can also search down here in this box. It doesn't really tell you the search box, but if you want to look for a specific exploit, you could type a little search here. Or any keyword really, it doesn't have to be an exploit. I just typed in Eternal and it showed me Metasploit has that exploit. So what we're going to do first here is we need to discover our target. Again, the target we're looking at is Metasploitable 2. So we're going to go up here to host, and there's a few different scans we can do to scan for host. So this is active reconnaissance because we're actually touching the target. I'm going to do an Msf scan, a Metasploit framework scan. Click on that. And we're going to scan the subnet we're on because our targets are on this subnet. To verify the subnet we're on, let's minimize Armitage here. And I'm going to go to another terminal window. I'll right click on it, new window, and I'm going to do an ifconfig just to verify. So we are on 10.11.5 is our IP address, but we're on the 10.11.0 subnet based on this 24-bit mask. Go ahead and maximize Armitage again. So I'm going to scan 10.1.1 24.0/24. There should only be one target. Well, there'll be two. There'll be the default gateway, Metasploitable 2, and ourselves actually. So there'll be 3. So there is a 10.1.1.4 with quite a few ports open. So we've got 22. You can see down here, port 22, port 23, 25, 21. These are all look pretty interesting. 21's Telnet, 22's SSH, 23, 21 is FTP, 23 is Telnet, 80, and up here it adds the targets. So the first things it does, the Metasploit Msf Scan, is it will scan for open ports. When that is completed, it will try to figure out what service is running on those ports. And when that is completed, it will also try to identify the operating system. When the operating system is identified, it will put an icon for the operating system in the window, the monitor window up here. Right now it just says unknown. It's still finding open ports, so it hasn't really started the interrogation of those ports for the service on those ports or the interrogation of the operating system yet. So we'll let this run. There's a lot of ports open for just 2 machines here. This is the gateway 10.1.1.2 provided by VirtualBox. It seems, as you can see here, most of the ports that are open are on 10.1.1.4, which is Metasploitable 2, which is designed to be exploitable. We also said to scan the entire subnet. So this is going to take a little while. We're scanning 20/24, which is 254 IP addresses. This says 256 because it does scan .0 in the broadcast. So I'll go ahead and pause the video and wait till this finishes. It looks like the scan for host and ports finally finished. So you can see right here it is scanning for the SSH version. So it's trying to figure out the services that run on all of those ports. And you notice here we have an error. This error has been happening for a while with Armitage. If you run the Msf Scan, so there's a couple ways around that. You can, go and fix the code, or you can run, if you right-click on, single click on the target, you can go up here to host and run an nmap scan. So I'm just going to run an nmap scan. I'll select quick scan and go ahead and click OK here. It automatically fills in the input. And this is what's actually running the command right there. It looks like that completed, so I can run another scan to figure out the operating system. So it looks like there's a lot of hosts available. I'm just scrolling up here. But the cool thing about Armitage, even if you don't quite understand everything you're doing, if you're new, in the console it tells you the exact command it's running. Like this right here is the command it ran for the nmap scan. Over here, in a new tab will pop up for each command you run. We scroll up. These are the commands it ran. So it used the auxiliary, which is under here, auxiliary. If we look at scanner, this is what it actually ran. And port scan TCP. So we scroll down here, I see port scan and then TCP. So that's what it ran, and these are the options it chose. The rhost, which is the target, the number of threads for the CPU, and then the ports it wanted to scan. So again, you can kind of run things through the GUI, but then go back and cross-reference what's actually happening, because if you were to type this in manually, you would be doing exactly what's at this console down here. So So close these. If you don't close these, you'll end up with hundreds of them open. So we go back up here and let's do another Msf scan. I'm going to do a quick scan, but with operating system detection. So let's just see if it figures out the operating system. Again, here's the command that's being ran. Mmap with a -SV, -N, the -O, capital O, is to figure out the operating system. The -F is a fast scan, which means it checks for the top 100 ports instead of the top 1,000 ports, which is what Mmap does by default. And you notice now it filled in some of the services, and it looks like it's done a guess here, a guess to determine it's Linux. All right, so that's completed, and now you notice the little penguin pops up here. So again, we're using Armitage, and we're going to run an exploit against this machine. So there's quite a few exploits we can run. We have SSH open, Telnet, SMTP, port 80. I can also right click on the target. I can try to log on with one of the available services that allow me to log on. I can click on services and look at the services here along with the version of the service that's running on that port if it's available. And if we're doing our vulnerability analysis, we could look up, for instance, pro FTPD 1.3.1 on cv.miter.org or somewhere to find out there's a vulnerability for that. We can also search for that over here to see if there's an exploit for it, as an example, in Metasploit. Before I do that, let's just go ahead. One of the things we can do is once we've figured out the ports that are open and the services that are running, we can find attacks. So if I go up here to attacks, find attacks. So what this does is based on the services that are open, the ports that are open and the services that are listening. Armitage is right now querying the Metasploit framework database to try to figure out all the potential exploits that might work against the identified operating system, the identified port that's open, and the identified service. So this is, it's going to err on the side of way more things than what will probably work. So we're going to end up with a big list here because, for instance, let's see, we're listening on port 80, HTTP. So this will find all kinds of attacks that might work against HTTP. So this is not a very surgical way of doing this, but it is effective occasionally. So you see it's completed here. So now we can select the attack menu. And then one of the things we can run is a Hail Mary. A Hail Mary is not stealthy at all, but it's often effective. And it's sometimes a good tactic to use to see if somebody is actually monitoring their network because it generates a ton of traffic. So if I run this, what it's going to do is try every exploit that Armitage thinks will work based on the find attacks. So if I click on Hail Mary, it even gives you a warning here that, this is pretty clumsy. It's not stealthy. You're going to generate lots of traffic. If you ran a Wireshark capture in the background, you'd see it going pretty crazy. So go ahead and click on yes. The purpose of this demonstration is not to be surgical. We're just doing a exploit against Metasploitable. And right now, you'll see here in the console, we have Hail Mary. It should start going through all of these exploits with various payloads. And if one of them works, we will be able to hopefully get a shell on the Metasploitable 2 system. So it looks like it finally finished querying the exploits, and now the payloads. Now you see it's launching every exploit. So if I were to run Wireshark right now, you would see all this stuff going on against the target up here. So this is not, again, like we said, surgical. You see a lot of the stuff is trying are probably not valid. There's Joomla right there. There's PHP Wiki, Dell case, Fritzbox. You know, there's all kinds of things. Pandora. There's all kinds of attacks going on. A Hail Mary, as you know from, or maybe don't know, but from football, it's kind of like the last straw. You throw the ball, hoping to get a touchdown, and hopefully somebody on your team will catch it in the end zone instead of the other team. So it's not surgical, and I don't recommend doing this if you want to carry out a pen test in a stealthy manner. So it looks like it's still going here. And you see it's trying all these against port 80. So it's trying basically every... There was Sun, exploits, Samba, a whole bunch of things. So if one of these worked and we get a shell, we should get some lightning bolt hands that come around the box here. It's launched everything, and right now it's waiting for a shell to establish if it worked. So this will count down to 0, and we'll see if we get a shell on the Metasploitable machine. So it said listing sessions, and we didn't get a shell actually. So even though we saw no active sessions here, we actually had one established. It just took a little while because my virtual machine is kind of slow. So this means we have control over this target. So let's right click on it. And it looks like we have shell 1 right here. So this is the shell that we have with this target. And if we select interact, this should pop up here in a second. So the shell's not popping up to interact with. If we actually, finally it is right here. So Metasploitable is actually so exploitable. We have 5 shells open. So if I clicked on interact with one, you can interact with a shell. Like right down here, we have the $sign. This is a shell on the target system. So let me make this a little bit bigger here. So I'm on the target system. I can type who am I? And let's type ls. Who am I didn't work. So sometimes these shells are a little bit difficult to interact with. Let's try shell 2. It looks like shell 1 disappeared actually. So shell 2. Let's try ls. So this is what we can see. These is the directory on the target system. So the present working directory is etc unreal. Who am I? So I am root. So this means I pretty much own that target. We didn't have to put a lot of thought into it. We just scanned the subnet, ran the Hail Mary, and this is Metasploitable, so it's designed to be exploitable, but we got 5 shells. So many shells that it slowed down my system from responding for a second. But that's pretty much it for this demonstration. Not every system obviously is going to be this exploitable. But sometimes it actually is this easy. You can run a Hail Mary on some systems, and if there's a vulnerability that's easily exploitable in Metasploit that gets you administrator or root level access, then this is how easy it is. But that's generally not the case if you're doing a penetration test externally or internally on a company if they are diligent about their patching. So if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below the video and we'll do our best to respond. Thank you.